Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our BBB Skill Builders series, the state of cybersecurity. My name is Jared Wise. I'm Vice President of Marketing Communications with Better Business Bureau. We also have Rebecca Harpster and Pearl Yan with us. They're the ones presenting today and have dove into this information and pulled it all together. And they have some great stuff for you all on cybersecurity today too. So they're a good team. So glad to have them presenting this information today. We are recording this webinar, by the way, so we'll post this on our YouTube page. And if you have any questions while the presentation is ongoing, please enter them in the lower right-hand screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. But for now, I'll pass it on to Pearl and Rebecca.
Hi everyone, so thank you for joining us today. So in the first slide, here is an outline of what we will be covering in today's webinar. We will first start off with an introduction of what cybersecurity is, then move into our key findings, and lastly talk about what you can do to protect yourself from an attack.
Okay, so I'm not sure if the slide is showing for you all yet, but I will still get started talking about introduction. So cybercrime is growing rapidly around the world.
There we go.
There you go, and one more.
Sorry about that.
Two
Ah.
So annual costs to the global economy are estimated to reach over actually $2 trillion a year by 2019. So this is a huge cost to businesses worldwide. And many people think that big businesses are actually the ones that are most affected by cybercrime. And we think this because that's what we see in the news. Data breaches from huge companies that affect, millions, if not more, hundreds of millions of consumers are what we hear about. But small businesses are increasingly targeted as well. And part of the reason for this actually is that small businesses often have access to bigger businesses as vendors or suppliers. And actually something we'll talk about later is that you're only as strong as your weakest link or supplier or vendor. So a lot of times cyber criminals will actually target small businesses in the hopes of being able to access large businesses. But small businesses are becoming more and more aware of the cyber threats that are out there. They're concerned about the risks, and they are taking some proactive security steps. But there's a lot more that can be done to educate, support, and empower small businesses to be cyber secure. And one thing that BBB did to kind of further this mission is we recently did a survey of about 1,100 small business owners and CEOs, about 3/4 in the United States and 1/4 in Canada, and we asked them questions about their current cybersecurity, if they've been affected by cyber attacks, just so we can get a better sense of the state of cybersecurity among small businesses, and then be better informed on how you can protect yourself. So now we're going to move into some of the key findings. So the first thing we asked is the risk of losing money. So we asked if businesses had lost money to a cyber attack. Overall, 4% reported losing money in the last 12 months, and 16%, which is 4 times as many, expect to lose money in the next 12 months. So you might be wondering why there's this huge jump in the number. One part is that the risk is rising, but it's not rising that fast. So more likely businesses are perceiving the risk to be higher than it really is. But we don't want to understate the risk. The risk is high, and we're going to touch on that in the next slide. So next we asked, has your business been the target of successful cyber attack? So not just if you've lost money, but if you've just been the target of attack in general. So the first 5 columns from the left break down the results from number of employees, but we're going to focus on that last furthermost right column because that's the overall response from all the respondents. So only, as we saw in the previous slide, only 4% said they had lost money in the last 12 months, but according to this, 11% had suffered a successful attack in the last 12 months, and another 12% had suffered a successful attack in the previous 6 months. So that's about 25% of respondents saying that they had been the victim of a cyber attack previously, which is a pretty high number. One thing we do want to highlight is that when we look from the left, which are the smaller companies, 0 to 5 on the very left, to the right, which are the bigger companies, 250 plus employees, we do see that the more employees a business has, the more likely they have to have been a target of an attack. So that is something to keep in mind. But any size of business can be the target of attack. As you see, even with only 0 to 5 employees, still 15% have been the target, which is a pretty sizable amount. one other thing to keep in mind is that these numbers may be conservative because 10% of respondents actually didn't know if they'd been the target. And that's concerning in and of itself. But it's true that detecting a cyber intrusion is not simple. It can be difficult. So these companies may have been targeted, but they just aren't aware that their systems have been compromised. So next we asked what data was affected by the cyber attack, because in order to know how to protect yourself and protect your data, you have to know what data is most likely to be lost. So we do expect passwords, which are number one, to be at the top of the list. And we talk about customer data, which is number 4 a lot as well as payment data. But if we go down the rest of the list, we do see other things like copyright and classified materials, business bank accounts, trade secrets. And these are really serious problems, and they can really severely impact your ability to do business as well. If if your intellectual property is compromised and someone else knows how you do business, that could really hurt your business itself. We definitely hear about the customer data, personal data, much more in the news because there's really stringent reporting requirements if you lose your customer data. So we're less likely to hear about lost business data, but it also is very important. So what we used to hear about, a common saying a couple of years ago was, it's not a question of if, but when your company will be cyber attacked. Now things are changing a little bit. The landscape is shifting towards stealthy attacks that businesses may not be aware of. So the new saying is more, there are 2 types of companies in the world, those that know they've been hacked and those that don't, which is a little scary. This is not obviously completely true because not every business has been hacked, but it's a larger risk than you think. And one thing we want to highlight is that a vendor that does cyber investigations found that on average, the attacker was in the network for 146 days before being detected. That's almost 5 months. So it's possible that a business has been compromised and just hasn't known it. It is difficult to detect these types of things. They're stealthy and they do try to hide, so it's not obvious. So now we're going to move on to addressing the risks. And addressing the risk of cybersecurity and cybercrime is all about balance. It needs to be a balance of awareness of the threats and a balance of what to do about the threats. And then in terms of what to do about it, it's very important to balance cost and effectiveness. So cost is the things you actually spend money on to manage risk. So if you invest in antivirus software, firewall software, multi-factor authentication, and effectiveness is how efficient those investments are and how well they're actually going to protect you. And this picture does do a good job of showing that, because as you can see, the cost is a lot smaller, that ball, than the effectiveness ball. And we want to keep the cost piece as small as possible, and we do that by leveraging the most effective and efficient investments we can. And this is really important because cost can add up. So we asked businesses how much they invested in cybersecurity in the last 12 months, and roughly it comes up to about $100 per employee per year. And that is a lot of money, especially for a small business. So you really want to make sure the cost is spent on efficient tools that are going to be effective. And this quote on the bottom is a quote from one of the respondents, and this really shows the importance of effectiveness. So he said, he or she said, the lack of education and our antivirus not catching the virus. So this business, even if they spent however many $100 on a really great antivirus software, they didn't update the antivirus software, so it didn't catch the virus, and they didn't train their employees not to click on links and emails that might infect their computer. So that training and the updating of software are the 2 most cost-effective things you can do. They're easiest and cheapest, and are the most important. So even if you spend money on the more costly things, if you don't spend money and invest in the more cost-effective, cheaper things, you might still be infected. And that's part of doing cybersecurity the right way. So the next question we asked is, we tried to measure small businesses' understanding of cybersecurity by asking a series of true or false questions. So just to highlight a few of the more notable results of this, there were definitely some good results. So the first one on that, 87% of small businesses knew that they were not safe from cyber attacks. And awareness is half the battle, so that's great. Also, around 80% of businesses know that phishing is the first line of attack, which you can see is the third line there, or fourth, I should say, and that's very important as well. But there are also some areas where businesses are less aware of cybersecurity. So that arrow is pointing to the result that only 50% of small businesses know that the bank is only responsible on consumer accounts. So if you, as a result of a cyber attack, your business bank account is compromised, the bank is not necessarily going to cover that. So you have a really good chance of losing a lot of money in that scenario. Also, I believe fifth from the bottom, you can see that only 17% of respondents knew that the most effective approach to cybersecurity is not necessarily to protect the information that's most vulnerable to attack. And we'll go into that a little bit later, but awareness is very important. Resource costs. So the problem is cybersecurity, yeah, it would be great to do everything we can to be cyber secure, to have all of the most effective controls, but small businesses just don't have the resources for that. So we asked businesses what the biggest thing hindering their cybersecurity was. Number one result is lack of resources, and then we also get into lack of expertise, understanding, lack of information, lack of time, and lack of training. Small businesses, you don't have a ton of employees, you don't necessarily have all the resources to implement everything. So we really need to focus on measures that are efficient, time efficient, and also cost effective. But also we need to focus on how we can guide and inform small businesses on what the best measures are to implement, because they don't necessarily know. So we need to have those resources out there. We need to have that information easily accessible.
So let's now shift into talking about effectiveness. Effectiveness is not about just having one very strong control in place, but it's really to have a group of controls in place that work together to have a desired outcome. So as the quote to the right suggests, multi-level authentication is a great extra security measure. So we're going to cover the 3 approaches of effectiveness, one being best practices, which is the easiest thing to do. Number 2 is standards and frameworks that are broader. And 3, to do your own cost-benefit analysis. So the effective best practices, we like to tell people to look what works for others. It may probably work for you as well. And one of those is having Internet Security Alliance. It's been adopted by 60 to 80% of businesses. The chart in the middle shows the correlation between the increasing adoption and the increasing effectiveness. So the higher the ratio, the better it is, and which we will go over in depth in the next slide. So this information was pulled from the chart that you saw in the previous slide, and we basically listed it from most effective to least effective. So the first being is to scan and filter email and web traffic. Many cyber attacks happen through email, so it's important to filter spam out because you may click on something wrong, and that's never good. And number 2 is to train employees on cybersecurity practices. As discussed earlier, education is very important, and it's a great soft cost for effectiveness, so it's sure to be high on the list of best practices. Number 3 is to set up lodging and store data for long-term, just in case anything goes wrong. You do have a backup of your information. And number 4 is to require multi-factor authentication. It doesn't hurt to have extra security, as I mentioned earlier. And then number 5 is to patch your systems and applications and probably do it automatically when there is a change, just so there's less room for error. And then getting into not as effective practices in the chart, number 6 is having an information security policy. It's kind of vague and not specific to what you should be doing. And number 7, this was the lowest adoption rate and effectiveness ratio, and that's to restrict employees' ability to surf the web on company computers. According to that, it was the least effective. And then the next slide is the NIST, also known as the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's the NIST cybersecurity framework, a most widely known and adopted voluntary framework. So we asked businesses what they were using the NIST cybersecurity framework and why they were using it. So the largest responses were driven by added value, that it was a better way to run business. And as you can see, 1/4 of respondents who have adopted the NIST framework reported that doing so, it was a contract requirement, and 1/3 reported as mandatory. And a majority of respondents also said that putting the framework in place really helped decrease the risk of cyber attacks.
So in terms of what your business practically can do, the NIST framework is a really good place to start, as well as putting in place some of those 7 measures that the Internet Security Alliance suggests. But sometimes it's important to do your own analysis as well, and this is especially important for businesses with unusual risks. So the Gordon-Loeb model is a way to determine your best level of investment, and it's a way to do your own analysis. And this really underpins all the approaches to cybersecurity, since it's a really detailed cost-benefit analysis approach. So if you're spending $1 on cybersecurity, you want to make sure you're receiving at least $1 or more in protection. So if it costs you $2 to get $1 worth of protection, the better thing to do would probably to actually buy insurance instead of putting that control in place. So there, if you just Google Gordon-Loeb model of investment, that is a really good place to start as well if your business is a little more unusual. For example, if you have really high value intellectual property, or if you have a particularly vulnerable customer base. So a key takeaway of all of this, we wanted to come up with a good soundbite. The reason we wanted to come up with this is that there is a factoid that floats around that says nearly X percentage of small businesses will close within 6 months of a cyber attack. But that percentage varies, and no one can actually find the source of the data. So we wanted to come up with another data point, another sound bite that could replace the statistic. So we found that 1/2 of small businesses reported that they could not remain profitable for more than a month if they lost essential data. And that's, that's a really big takeaway. That's a really, I don't want to say scary thing, because there are things you can do to protect yourself, but it really underlines the importance of cybersecurity and why your small business needs to be doing things to protect yourself. And now we're going to show you our resource center on our website that can help you actually put in place some of these practical measures and improve your cybersecurity.
So this is 5 steps to better business cybersecurity. There are a lot of steps here. The information that Rebecca and Pearl pulled were fantastic. It was great data points, great information, great research, and then the outcome of what do you do with all that information, because there's a lot. But this is a great resource. This is on our homepage. So if you just go to bbb.org and put the location in the upper right, and you make sure you're in whatever city in the Bay Area you're at, and then in the For Business section on the drop-down, what we call the hamburger menu, which a lot of people laugh at me because of that, the hamburger menu drop-down, there's a For Business section. If you click that, then you'll go to another page, and then you'll be able to go to BBB Cybersecurity. So the cybersecurity section will give you a lot of resources and information on how you can protect your business and protect yourself as well. But it tells a little bit about what BBB Cybersecurity is, what the program is. And then there's also a module here. It's a 5-step approach. So on this, it'll actually show you a circle module on things that you can do and the 5-step approach you can do to protect yourself. So of course you want to identify, you want to protect, detect, respond, recover. So those are the big 5 steps, and then there's 5 key points here that'll go into a little more detail about the framework and about what you need to do. So this is great resources and information. We're happy to share the link if you have one. If you would like. And I apologize. There we go, phone's ringing. Didn't turn my phone off. This is great information and great resources for you and your business. We also give presentations. Pearl is our communication specialist. She's out in the community all the time. She gives fantastic presentations, and one of them is on cybersecurity for your business. So if you're interested in that as well, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to come to your business and give you that presentation, maybe add some more details to it, depending on what exactly you're looking for. I also want to let you know that there's another website for consumers. So we don't want to just think about the business, but we also want to think about consumers, what they should do in the process also. So if you go to bb.org/breach, and that's it. So bb.org/breach. There's information on what you can do in the wake of a data breach. So on the other side, what consumers can do, and of course, important information like freeze your credit accounts. If you want to put a hold on it, that's a big thing. Always double check it. Get your free annual credit report every year through annualcreditreport.com. Is it com or .org?
Com.
.com. Sorry.
There's a lot of sound-alike ones. So you have to make sure you're going to the right one.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And you get a free one every year. But I mean, even as a business owner or employee, you should double check your credit also personally. So keep these tips in mind, the cybersecurity information in mind as well, because they will help you when these happen. Because this day and age, everyone is getting, I mean, you will see a lot of news coverage of massive data breaches that are going on. From anywhere from a restaurant to a store you shop at to even now your email itself, like Yahoo, for instance, was one of the bigger ones. Health insurance, yeah, so a lot of good ones. So it's like a lot of big ones. But just be more aware, and the more aware you are, the more protected you can be. So if anybody has any questions for Rebecca and Pearl, like I said, they've uncovered and dug into some great research, including that study. Please go ahead and ask that question in the lower right, and we will share those. And we have one right now of just ask, will the slides be shared? And we can share the slides, so feel free to email us. Who wants to
I have the slides.
So I'm gonna give you Pearl's email address, and I'll send that to everybody. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Pearl, and she'll get you that information as well. And beyond that, are there any other questions at this time? I don't think anything else has really popped up right now. All right, I'm going to throw the slides back up real quick because, of course, we have a couple others on here. Oops, I think I pulled the wrong one up.
Here's the beginning.
Oh, let me scroll through this again. So this is a quick recap. More like I need to scroll through. Yeah, there we go. And I think I have the older one pulled up, but that's okay. I'm getting to this part right here, our social media. So Rebecca posts our social media on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. What else?
LinkedIn is a good one for businesses to follow us on as well.
We also have YouTube, and we post on Facebook and Twitter about 2 to 3 times a day. And we also share a lot of tips on cybersecurity, so be sure to follow us.
Yes, and especially recently we have October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is part of the reason that we wanted to talk about cybersecurity for this month's webinar as well.
Good point. And they post very often. So you'll see pictures, there'll be videos, there'll be like webinar invites. So a lot of good information on there. And in LinkedIn, make sure if you're a business, please be following us on LinkedIn because we have a lot of great business resource information that we share on there as well. So please follow us on LinkedIn as well. And that pretty much concludes our webinar for today. Thank you again for attending. And there's the contact information for both Rebecca and Pearl. So if you have any questions, please reach out to them. They're a great resource. And they're both social media pros too, so if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to them for any social media questions you may have as well. And we will probably be returning next month for another Skill Builder series, so please stay tuned to your emails. And with that, I hope you all have a great Halloween couple days. Everybody dresses up. I know here in our office we're going to have a dress-up party tomorrow, so we're excited about that. And yeah. So happy Halloween and have a good rest of the month. And we will see you all next month for our next webinar series.
Yes, thank you for joining us.